I stuffed the peanut butter sandwich I made for my little daughter into her lunchbox. My phone screen lit up. A reminder popped up from the family's shared calendar. 10 a.m. Prenatal checkup. I stared at that blue reminder box. I touched my own flat stomach. 3 years ago, the doctor removed my uterus from here. When Mark left yesterday morning, he carried his usual cedar cologne scent. He stood at the entrance, putting on his shoes, kissed my forehead, and said he was heading to Chicago for a regional sales meeting. I tapped open the calendar details with my thumb. The address was clearly displayed on the screen. That high-end maternity center wasn't even out of state. It was just a 10-minute drive from our house down the highway. The oven in front of me let out a ding. I flipped my phone face down on the marble countertop. I walked to the sink, turned on the cold water, cupped my hands, and splashed water on my face. Droplets dripped from my chin into my collar. I grabbed a dry towel to wipe my face. Mark's flight to Chicago should have taken off 2 hours ago. Now, the little that's showing his phone's location was sitting in the parking lot of that maternity center. Yesterday, he also withdrew a full $20,000 from our joint account. He said that money was to cover a losing stock investment. I picked up my phone again and opened the official website of that maternity center. The booking page was very clear. Initial registration plus the full VIP prenatal package cost exactly $20,000. Someone is pregnant. Mark is paying for it. At 6 p.m, the garage door rumbled as it rolled up. I placed the freshly baked meatloaf on the dining table, next to Mark's favorite red wine. The door to the garage pushed open. Mark walked in carrying his briefcase. He changed into slippers and tossed his car keys on the shoe cabinet. "That smells amazing," he said, taking a deep breath, then came over and put his arm around my shoulder. Nothing beats home-cooked meals. Those cold sandwiches in Chicago gave me a stomachache. He stood close. I caught a faint scent of baby powder from his collar. The lobby of that maternity center usually has that kind of fragrance. I turned around, grabbed his arms with both hands, and squeezed the fabric of his shirt tightly. "Mark," I said, looking him straight in the eyes, "you've been hiding something big from me." Mark's pupils instantly dilated. His arm around me went stiff. He stepped back half a step, the heel of his shoe hitting the edge of the kitchen island. What are you talking about?" he stammered, his eyes darting to the side. I picked up the phone that was face down on the table, flipped the screen around, and held it up to his face. That blue calendar reminder was glaringly bright. Mark saw the words on the screen. His mouth slightly opened, and his Adam's apple bobbed violently. His face turned pale in a second, and a fine layer of sweat broke out on his forehead. He reached out to grab the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. I suddenly threw myself into his arms, wrapping my hands tightly around his back. "Thank you, honey." I buried my face in his shoulder, speaking loudly with a thick, nasal tone. "You're amazing." Mark stood there like a wooden post. His hands hung in the air, not daring to come down and hug me. "You secretly found a surrogate to make my dream come true," I said loudly, rubbing my tears onto his expensive suit jacket. "How could you be so silly? $20,000 for the registration fee, and you lied to me about losing it in stocks. Why did you have to bear all this alone?" I pulled back, cupping his face in my hands. Mark's lips were trembling. He looked at me, fear plain in his eyes. It took him about 10 seconds to find his voice. You saw it," he swallowed hard. "I saw it. That maternity center is so hard to book." I pulled him over to the dining table and pressed him into a chair. "You even went to the checkup yourself. Is the surrogate doing well? Is the baby healthy, boy or girl?" Mark's hands were on his thighs, nervously rubbing the fabric of his pants. He stared at the table full of food, unable to say a word. He was trapped now. He had no room to deny it. If he said there was no surrogate, he'd have to admit to cheating and a secret child. She's doing fine," Mark said, lowering his head, his voice as faint as a mosquito's buzz. "It's a boy. Very healthy." "Great." I clapped my hands together loudly, walked to the liquor cabinet, and grabbed 2 glasses. "We have to celebrate tonight." I poured him a full glass of red wine. His hand shook badly as he lifted the glass, spilling a few drops on the tablecloth. He tilted his head back and downed the whole glass in one gulp. After dinner, I immediately took out my tablet and sat on the living room couch. Mark sat at the other end of the couch, frantically texting on his phone, his face dark and gloomy the whole time. "Honey, come look at this." I patted the empty spot next to me. Mark shuffled over reluctantly. I pointed at the screen. "Since the surrogate is already pregnant, we need to set up the nursery right away. This custom-made crib requires a 6-month advance order, plus the whole set of non-toxic eco-friendly paint. It'll cost $8,000 total." Mark gasped and quickly grabbed my wrist. "Don't rush into buying it. It's still too early." "Too early?" I shook off his hand, my eyes wide. "Our family has been waiting for this child for 3 years. How much did you pay that surrogate? We also need to buy her nutritional supplements." "Oh, and the next prenatal checkup is next Tuesday, right? I want to come with you." Mark suddenly stood up.
"No,"
he shouted. The living room fell silent for 2 seconds. I tilted my head back slightly, looking up at him.
"Why not?"
"I'm the baby's mom. Does the surrogacy agency have a rule against the employer's family accompanying?" Mark ran his hands through his hair and loosened his tie. "No, they don't," he said, avoiding my gaze and staring at the floor. "I'm just worried you'll get too emotional and scare her." "I promise I'll behave," I said with a smile, tugging at his shirt. "Honey, since you paid the registration fee with your card, let me see the contract from that surrogacy agency. I need to check the terms. What if that woman runs off after giving birth?" Sweat dripped directly from Mark's forehead onto the carpet. The contract. The contract is in the company's safe. He made up an excuse on the spot. "Fine, then bring it home tomorrow." I stood up and yawned. "I'm going to take a shower." "Oh, and I already ordered that crib using your supplementary credit card. The confirmation email will hit your inbox soon." I turned and went upstairs, leaving Mark standing alone in the empty living room. I heard the sound of a glass shattering downstairs. The next morning at 6:30, I woke up on time. I went to the storage room on the first floor and hauled out several huge cardboard boxes. The noise of me dragging boxes downstairs woke Mark up, and he came running down in his pajamas. "What are you doing?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. "Clearing out a room," I said, pushing a box of old clothes out the door. "The guest room faces south and gets great light. It'll be perfect for the nursery. Come help me move this bookshelf to the garage." Mark reluctantly walked over and reached for the bookshelf. The wood was heavy, and his face turned red as he strained, veins bulging in his arms. "After work today, come with me to the mall," I instructed him while wiping dust off the walls. "I want to buy some gifts for the surrogate. She's going through this for us, so we need to treat her like a little sister." "What did you say her name was yesterday?" Mark set the bookshelf down on the garage's concrete floor, panting heavily. "I never mentioned her name," he said, leaning against the wall, eyes fixed on the ground. "Then tell me now." I straightened up, holding a wet rag, and stared at him. Mark turned his head and looked at the lawn outside the garage. "Amy," he uttered a name. "Amy, that's a lovely name." I tossed the rag into the bucket, splashing water. "Honey, don't worry. I'll make sure Amy has the most comfortable pregnancy possible." I walked to the entryway, picked up his briefcase, and handed it to him. "Go to work now. Don't forget to bring back that surrogacy contract you signed. If there's no contract, I'll call the police and report that woman for defrauding us of $20,000. Mark's hand visibly trembled as he took the briefcase. It dropped to the floor, scattering documents everywhere. He crouched down to pick them up, looking incredibly clumsy. I stood on the steps, watching him scramble at my feet. He'd have to come up with every trick in the book to forge a legally binding surrogacy contract before the weekend, and then convince that mistress named Amy to sign it. The game had begun. I parked my car in the underground garage of that maternity center. I walked to the back of the car and pressed the trunk release. The door slowly lifted. Inside was packed with the supplements I'd just bought from the mall. 3 large boxes of premium bird's nest, 2 cases of imported high-calcium pregnancy milk powder, and a full set of plant-based anti-stretch mark oil. I hauled everything out. The edges of the cardboard boxes dug into my fingers, turning them red. I stacked them up, hugged them tightly to my chest. They were heavy. I walked step by step toward the elevator. The elevator doors opened. The lobby was filled with the same baby powder scent as Mark's. The marble floor was polished to a shine, reflecting the cold overhead lights. 2 rows of light blue leather sofas sat in the middle of the hall, with several pregnant women sitting there, heads down, looking at their phones. I walked up to the nurse's station. I placed the huge pile of supplements on the marble counter. The bottoms of the boxes hit the surface with a dull thud. The nurse looked up. She was wearing a pink uniform.
Hello, Mom.
"Do you have an appointment?" she asked. "I'm looking for someone." I stared into her eyes. "I'm looking for Amy. She had a prenatal checkup here at 10 this morning. Our family paid for the registration fee."
$22.
"I'm the baby's mother." The nurse froze. Her fingers stopped midair over the keyboard. She looked at me, then at the pile of expensive gift boxes on the desk.
Please wait.
"Let me check." She lowered her head to look at the screen. "Second floor, 3rd exam room. Do you need me to call her for you?" The nurse asked, looking up.
No.
"Just call out the man who handles her payments. His name is Mark." I slid a red envelope stuffed with cash onto the counter in front of the nurse. "This is a red envelope for the doctor in the exam room. Tell Mark that his wife is waiting for him in the lobby downstairs. Have him bring Amy down to pick up the nutritional supplements." The nurse glanced at the envelope. She immediately grabbed the intercom phone. Not long after, the elevator floor indicator lit up as it descended to the 1st floor. With a ding, the doors opened. Mark strode out. He wasn't even wearing his suit jacket, just a wrinkled white shirt. His tie was crooked, hanging loosely around his neck. He looked around. When his gaze swept over me at the nurse's station, his steps came to an abrupt halt. He recoiled half a step, as if punched in the chest. He quickly walked up to me. He reached out to grab my arm. I sidestepped, dodging his hand. "What are you doing here?" he hissed through clenched teeth. "I'm here to see our family's great contributor." I pointed at the pile of boxes on the counter. "I bought all the best pregnancy supplements on the market. Where's Amy? Why did you come down alone?" Sweat began to bead on Mark's forehead. A drop trickled down his brow into his eye. He blinked hard. "She's upstairs getting an ultrasound. You need to go home. There are too many eyes and ears here." He reached for the boxes, trying to shove them all back into my hands. "The more people, the better." I raised my voice. A few pregnant women on the nearby sofa turned to look at us. Everyone can witness how generous we are to our surrogate mother. I already told the nurse that from now on, all of Amy's expenses will be charged to my supplementary card. "Mark, go get her down here. I have to thank her in person. If you don't bring her down, I'll go upstairs myself and search every room until I find her." Mark set the bird's nest box he was holding back on the counter. The edge of the box hit the surface with a thud. He wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. He turned and walked to the elevator. He stepped inside. The doors closed. I stood there watching the floor numbers climb, then descend. The doors opened again. Mark came out gripping a young woman by the wrist. She was wearing a loose floral dress and flat shoes. Her hair was dyed flaxen, and she had on a full set of delicate makeup. She was very thin, with a flat stomach, no sign of pregnancy at all. This was Amy. Amy's face was bright red. She struggled hard, trying to shake off Mark's hand. His fingers clamped around her wrist like iron pincers, the veins on the back of his hand bulging. "Let go of me," Amy shrieked. Everyone in the lobby turned to look. Mark yanked her in front of me. He leaned close to her ear and muttered something through gritted teeth. I was standing close enough to hear every word. "If you want to end up sleeping on the street right now, keep making a scene." Amy's body went rigid. Her eyes were wide, fixed on Mark. Mark released her wrist. A ring of angry red marks was left on her pale skin. I picked up a box of essential oils and held it out to Amy. "Hello, Amy. Nice to meet you." I looked into her eyes, the corners of my mouth lifting. "Mark told me everything last night. You've really been through a lot. Carrying our family's child must be so hard. Here, These stretch mark oils are for you. Make sure to apply them every day once your belly starts to grow. Amy didn't react. She stared blankly at the box of oils in my hand. Her chest heaved. Take it. Mark growled beside her. He reached out, pressed down on her shoulder, and shoved her forward. Amy stumbled a step. She gasped for air, and tears instantly flooded her eyes, smearing her mascara. Trembling, she extended both hands and took the box of oils. It shook violently in her grasp. Thank you, Amy. I reached out and patted the back of her hand twice. Mark said you're willingly having this baby for us. You've sacrificed so much for our family. Amy looked up at me. Her lips were bitten raw, with traces of blood. Call out to her. Kick out your tongue? Mark stood behind Amy, one hand pressing down hard on the back of her neck, forcing her head down. Say, madam, from now on, all your living expenses will be paid by my wife. Amy was forced to lower her head. Her eyes were fixed on the marble floor. The hall was so quiet that only the sound of the air conditioning vents could be heard. Everyone's eyes were on her. A gurgling sound came from Amy's throat as she opened her mouth. Thank you, madam. She squeezed out those words from deep in her throat. As soon as she finished, she suddenly covered her mouth, pushed Mark away forcefully, and stumbled toward the trash can in the corner of the hall. She leaned over the edge of the trash can, retching violently. Her floral dress was trembling. The essential oil box that had been in her hand fell to the floor, the plastic packaging cracking open. I turned to look at Mark. Mark stood there, his face as white as paper. He watched Amy retching by the trash can, his legs trembling slightly. Oh my, such severe morning sickness. I bent down, picked up the cracked essential oil box from the floor, and shoved it into Mark's arms. Mark, go keep her company. And tell her that tomorrow at 2 p.m., I'll bring the nanny to check out the apartment you two rented. If she thinks it's too small, I'll find her a new place. Mark's pupils shrank rapidly. He held the broken essential oil box, his breathing completely erratic. How do you know that address? Mark's voice trembled like an autumn leaf. I saw the rental contract you left by the storage cabinet in the garage. 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, good lighting. Too close to the road. I'm worried it'll disturb our child. I helped him straighten his wrinkled shirt collar. Since our family is paying for the surrogacy, we should at least inspect the surrogate mother's living environment, don't you think? Mark couldn't say a word. He just stared at me. I turned and walked toward the nurse's station. Excuse me, I said to the nurse. Please move all the remaining supplements to the 3rd consultation room on the 2nd floor and give them to Miss Amy. Also, please print out a detailed prenatal appointment calendar for Miss Amy. As the sponsor, I have the right to follow up on the fetus's health at any time. The nurse nodded, immediately started typing, and the printer hummed. An A4 sheet filled with dates came out of the machine. I took the paper, folded it twice, and tucked it into my coat pocket. I walked back to Mark. He was still standing there, like a statue drained of cement. Amy by the trash can was still retching, even spitting out some bile. A few pregnant women walked over to hand her tissues, but she pushed them away, covering her face with both hands and crouching on the floor, curled into a ball. Honey, take good care of her. I patted Mark on the shoulder. Don't let her get too emotional. Remember to push her to sign the surrogacy contract quickly. Bring it home for me to review. Without the contract, I won't keep sending money to that rental account. After saying that, I walked toward the elevator without looking back. I stepped into the elevator and turned around. The doors slowly closed. In the second before they shut completely, I saw Mark leaning weakly against a marble pillar, the essential oil box slipping from his hand to the floor. I returned to the underground garage, opened the car door, and sat in the driver's seat. I placed both hands on the steering wheel. The leather was cold. Upstairs just now, I had confirmed 2 things. First, Mark didn't have the surrogacy contract at all. I had backed him into a corner, and he could only use violence to force his mistress to play along. Second, that woman named Amy had never intended to be a surrogate. She wanted to move up, to have a legitimate status. Today, in front of everyone, I had slapped the label of surrogacy tool firmly on her forehead. This fire would soon burn completely between the two of them. I took out my phone and dialed a number. Hello, Sunshine Real Estate? I stared at the concrete pillar in front of the car. Yes, I have a house to list for rent. Fully furnished with all appliances. I want to rent it out as fast as possible. 1 month deposit, 3 months rent up front. Viewings can start this afternoon. I'll send you the address right away. I hung up, started the car. The engine rumbled low. That house was fully paid for and under my name. Inside were all of Mark's expensive custom suits, limited edition sneakers, and high-end golf clubs. It was time for me to go back and pack his bags. Since he cared so much about his surrogate mother, he could move in and live with her. That roadside rental apartment was just big enough to hold their great love. I stepped on the gas. The car shot out of the underground garage and into the blinding sunlight. I parked the car in the driveway. I pushed open the wooden door to the storage room. On the bottom shelf was a roll of thick black plastic trash bags. These bags were originally meant for yard leaves and gave off a sharp industrial plastic smell. I tore off 15 bags. I walked up the stairs to the master bedroom on the second floor. I pushed open Mark's walk-in closet. On the left rack hung 8 custom suits he had just ordered last month. I grabbed the rack with both hands and yanked it down hard. The suits, along with the wooden hangers, fell onto the carpet. I crumpled them up and stuffed them into the black trash bags. Next was the shoe cabinet. 10 pairs of Italian handmade leather shoes, plus 3 pairs of limited edition sneakers. I grabbed the shoes and tossed them into the bags. The heels clacked together with a dull thud. On the bathroom counter, electric toothbrush, razor, cologne. In the desk drawer, watch boxes. I pulled open all the drawers and dumped out the tie clips, cufflinks, and even the underwear. I didn't leave a single thing behind, swept everything into the trash bags. The black plastic bags bulged, stuffed to the brim. The bags were extremely heavy. I grabbed the edges and dragged them down the stairs, one step at a time. The plastic bags scraped against the wooden floor. I piled all 15 full bags on the lawn outside the yard. Next to them sat his $2,000 golf club set. At 1 in the afternoon, the real estate agent arrived on time with a young couple. The man had a thick beard and wore heavy boots. The woman, with a big pregnant belly, held a tape measure and was sizing up the living room. The house comes fully furnished with high-end furniture, I said, pointing to the leather sofa and the newly replaced wool carpet. First month's rent plus a deposit equal to 3 months' rent. You can move in this afternoon. The man looked around, thoroughly satisfied, and completed the transfer on the spot. I pulled out my phone and changed the electronic lock code for the front door. I stuck a post-it note with a new code on the refrigerator door. Welcome in. I picked up a small rolling suitcase and walked out the door. At 3 in the afternoon, Mark's car pulled up at the edge of the lawn. The tires screeched against the asphalt as he slammed on the brakes. He jumped out of the car. He wasn't even wearing his suit jacket. His shirt collar was open, and his tie was completely gone. He stared at the pile of black trash bags on the lawn. The new tenant with the beard was just carrying a large cardboard box up the steps. Mark rushed over, trying to pull open the screen door. The bearded tenant immediately turned around and blocked the door frame with his broad shoulders. Hey, buddy, what do you think you're doing? The tenant stared at Mark. This is my house. Mark pointed at the house number, then turned and shouted at me, standing on the other side of the lawn. What the hell is wrong with you? Why did you throw my stuff out? Who is this guy? The new tenant, I said, hands in my coat pockets, looking at him calmly. I've already rented out the house. Mark stormed down the steps and stopped right in front of me. His eyes were bloodshot. He was panting heavily, his chest heaving, his breath turning into white mist in the cold air. What gives you the right to rent out the house? He pointed at the black bags on the ground. The deed is in my name only. This house belongs to me alone. You don't have a say in even a single brick. I took a step back to avoid his spit. Mark, the surrogacy costs are too high. You paid the $20,000 registration fee, and we still have to pay Amy's monthly living expenses and nutrition costs. I rented out the house, so we can use the rent to support her. Mark's face turned purple. He clenched his fists, the veins on the back of his hands bulging. You get these people out of here right now. He roared at me. I want to go to sleep inside now. The contract is signed. I can't afford the penalty. I pointed at the 15 black bags on the ground. All your stuff is here. Amy is pregnant right now and very emotionally unstable. She was dry heaving so badly at the hospital just now. How can she manage without someone to take care of her? You're a responsible man. Take your stuff now and move into that rental to be with her. You need to take good care of our surrogate mother. Mark gritted his teeth. So hard the muscles in his jaw twitched. He wanted to curse but couldn't find a single word to argue back. He had admitted yesterday that Amy was the surrogate. He dug his own grave, and now he had to jump into it. The bearded tenant walked to the edge of the front steps and looked down at Mark. Take your garbage and get out of here. Don't make a scene in front of my house. The tenant's voice was loud and intimidating. Mark looked up at the burly tenant, then down at the trash bags on the ground. His shoulders slumped completely. He bent over, grabbed 2 bags, and dragged them toward his car. I stood nearby, watching him haul them one trip at a time. The shirt on his back was completely soaked through with sweat. His leather shoes sank into the muddy lawn, covered in dirt. A trash bag was torn by a tree branch. A few pairs of socks and a tie fell out. Mark had to crouch down, awkwardly picking up the items and stuffing them back into the torn hole. The trunk was packed full. The back seat was also crammed. The set of golf clubs was wedged into the passenger seat. Mark slid into the driver's seat. He slammed the door shut. The engine roared loudly, and the car shot forward. I watched Mark's taillights disappear around the corner. I pulled my small suitcase and walked toward the hotel across the street. I had booked the top-floor suite for a month in advance. The real show was just beginning. Mark parked the car outside the apartment building where Amy rented a place. It was an old red brick building, right next to an elevated highway. Every few minutes, heavy trucks roared overhead, making the windows buzz. Mark struggled up to the 3rd floor, carrying 4 black bags. The hallway reeked of a pungent onion smell mixed with the stench of backed-up sewage. He walked to door 302 and kicked the door panel hard with his foot. The door cracked open. Amy stood behind it. She had already changed out of her pretty floral dress and was wearing a worn-out gray pajama set. Her hair was a messy tangle on her shoulders. Her eyes were swollen like walnuts, with mascara smudged into 2 dark shadows under her eyelids. When she saw Mark and the black trash bags in his hands, she immediately pulled the door wide open. What are you bringing this garbage here for? Amy's voice was sharp and thin. Don't even ask. Mark squeezed through the door and dropped the bags heavily onto the cheap wooden floor. That crazy woman rented out the house. She threw all my stuff out. I have no choice but to stay here with you. Amy looked at the black bags on the floor, then up at Mark. Stay here. Amy pointed at the cramped space, less than 40 square meters. There was only a narrow double bed, barely room to turn around. The wallpaper at the corners was peeling and yellowed. There's not even a decent closet here. Where are you going to hang your suits? You snore when you sleep, and this place has 0 soundproofing. Mark was already fuming, and Amy's complaints sent his anger straight to his head. Haven't I stayed here plenty of times before? Mark shouted back. You never complained about it being small back then. Today at the hospital, you pretended to gag right in front of her, acting all fragile. You deliberately set her off, and now I'm homeless because of you. Are you happy now? Me, acting fragile? Amy's eyes widened as she shoved Mark in the chest. You coward. When your wife smashed that essential oil bottle into my hand and made me call her ma'am, I didn't even dare to say a word. You held my head down just to save your own face. What kind of man are you? That's called strategy. Mark grabbed a throw pillow from the couch and hurled it to the floor. If I lose my job, who's going to support you? Who's going to pay your rent? Do you have any money now? Amy sneered, pointing at the trash bags on the floor. You don't even have a place to live. Now you're crawling back to me like a dog, dragging a few crappy bags. Your wife is swaggering around spending your money on rent, and you can't get a single cent back. Mark was hit where it hurt, his face turning pale with rage. He raised his hand and pointed at Amy's nose. His fingers trembled uncontrollably. Amy took a quick step back, grabbed the plastic tissue box from the coffee table, and slammed it onto the floor by Mark's feet. Tissues scattered everywhere. "Don't touch me." Amy pointed at the door. "Take your garbage bags and get out. I've had enough of you." Mark stood there frozen. Just then, a big truck rumbled past outside, the deafening noise drowning out the silence in the room. Mark looked at the scattered tissues and the torn trash bags. He had nowhere to go. He turned around and plopped down onto the worn-out fabric sofa. The springs let out a harsh squeak. He buried his face in his hands, resting his head on his knees. I sat on the carpet in the top-floor hotel suite. The carpet was thick, pure wool, with a slight prickly feel under my palm. Spread out on the floor in front of me were Mark's credit card statements. I pulled out a red thick-tip marker and uncapped it. I flipped through the transaction records one by one. Last month, one of Mark's supplementary cards had a fixed charge of $30 every Tuesday night at 9 o'clock. The location was called Old Thai Billiards Hall. Mark had never held a pool cue. He didn't even know how to break. He hated the smell of smoke and noisy places. I picked up my phone and opened the information for the supplementary cardholder. In the name field, it clearly read, Amy. I tossed the red marker onto the carpet. I grabbed my car keys and headed out. I drove 3 blocks and parked on the curb across from Old Thai Billiard Hall. I rolled down the window. The sign for the billiard hall glowed with red neon. A few men stood outside smoking, cigarettes in hand. I pulled out a $100 bill and handed it to a kid handing out flyers on the street. I pointed at the man in the black leather jacket with tattoos on his arms, standing at the billiard hall entrance. Go ask that guy in the leather jacket if he knows Amy. I shoved the money into the kid's hand. The kid ran over. They exchanged a few words. The man in the leather jacket immediately dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his shoe, and looked around nervously. I pushed open the car door, crossed the street, and walked over. What do you want with Amy? The leather jacket guy stared at me. The muscles in his arms were tense. His name was Rick. You know her? I looked at the metal zipper on his leather jacket. It was a little rusty. She's under my watch. Rick frowned and stepped forward. She's pregnant, resting at home. What the hell do you want with her? I opened my bag and pulled out a yellow manila envelope. I handed it to Rick. Rick tore open the edge of the envelope roughly. Paper scraps fell to the ground. A few photos slid out. The first photo showed Mark carrying a thick black plastic trash bag into the entrance of Amy's apartment building. The second photo was the prenatal checkup calendar I had printed out. It clearly showed Mark's full name and the $20,000 registration fee he paid with his credit card. That old man spent $20,000 on a premium prenatal package for her. I pointed at the amount on the calendar paper. He moved all his stuff into her apartment last night. They're sharing a bed. Rick's face flushed red instantly, veins bulging on his neck. He crumpled the photos into a ball and slammed them onto the concrete floor. Bullshit. Rick roared, his voice louder than the car engines on the street. The kid in Amy's belly is mine. We're getting our marriage license next month. I stepped back to avoid his swinging arm. You can go check room 302 yourself. That old man is sleeping in your territory right now. I turned around, got in the car, and started the engine. The steering wheel was cold. I drove to the corner of Amy's apartment building and parked in the shadow of 2 big trees. I killed the engine and rolled down the window. 10 minutes later, Rick's pickup truck screeched into the parking spot below the apartment building. The wheels splashed through a puddle on the curb, sending muddy water onto the wall. Rick jumped out, clutching the crumpled prenatal calendar in his hand, and stormed into the entrance of the red brick building. The door slammed shut with a loud bang. I pushed open my car door and slowly walked up the stairs. The hallway reeked of sewer backup. I stopped at the landing between the 2nd and 3rd floors. From the 3rd floor came a massive kick against a door. The wooden door slammed into the wall, sending chunks of plaster falling to the floor. The door to room 302 was wide open. Mark stood in the middle of the living room, wearing a pair of plaid pajama pants. He held a half-eaten green apple in his hand, completely frozen. Amy ran out of the bathroom, her hair wet and dripping. When she saw Rick, she let out a terrified scream and pressed herself against the wall. "Rick, listen to me." Amy raised her hands, her voice trembling. Rick walked over, grabbed Mark by the collar of his shirt, and lifted him off the ground. The apple fell from Mark's hand and rolled into the corner. "Who the hell are you?" Mark struggled to pry Rick's fingers off. "What are you doing here? Who runs this place?" Rick sneered, raising the crumpled calendar paper and slapping it directly onto Mark's face. "You paid 20 grand for her prenatal care? You think she's carrying your kid?" When Mark heard the word prenatal, his body stiffened. He pulled the paper off his face and saw the amount and the name clearly. "She took my money, so of course she's carrying my kid." Mark gritted his teeth and shoved Rick's chest hard. "I even got kicked out of the big house for her and moved into this dump." Rick suddenly burst out laughing, the sound echoing in the small room. He turned his head and stared hard at Amy. "Amy, tell this idiot whose kid it really is." Rick stepped forward, his shoes squeaking on the wooden floor. "Last month, we spent a whole week at the motel behind the billiard hall. You told me yourself you were pregnant and told me to find a job to support the family." Mark froze. He turned and looked at Amy, who was cowering in the corner. "What did he say?" Mark's voice trembled, his shoulders shaking along with it. "What the hell is he talking about?" Amy covered her face, slid down the wall, and crouched on the floor, sobbing. Tears smeared her face.
I'm sorry.
"Mark, I'm sorry." Amy was crying so hard she could barely breathe. "I don't have the money for rent. Your wife cut off your card, and you can't even afford to eat. Rick is about to find a job." Mark stood there like a block of wood. His mouth opened, but no sound came out for a long moment.
$22,000.
A house with a garden. All those custom suits. He threw it all away to come here and sleep on a crappy couch. He was just a sucker who paid to set up a file. That kid didn't even have a single strand of his hair. I stood at the turn of the stairs, watching Mark. The phone in his pocket suddenly rang. That familiar blue shared calendar alert tone was especially jarring in the quiet hallway. The screen lit up, showing a reminder for tomorrow afternoon's prenatal music concert. Mark slowly lowered his head, looking at his ridiculous plaid pajama pants, then at the half-eaten apple rolling on the floor. Liar. Mark suddenly exploded with a huge roar. He charged at Amy like a madman, reaching out to grab her shoulders. Rick lifted his foot and kicked Mark square in the stomach. Mark fell backward, crashing hard into the old coffee table. The glass top instantly cracked into several large fissures, with a sharp shattering sound. Mark curled up on the floor, clutching his stomach, dry heaving in pain, sweat dripping from his forehead in big beads. "You dare touch her." Rick pointed at Mark on the ground. "Take your garbage and get out of this house right now. I've already paid Amy's rent. You're not taking a single thread with you." Rick grabbed the 2 black plastic garbage bags Mark had brought yesterday, walked to the door, and threw them down the stairs with force. The bags tumbled down the concrete steps and stopped next to my boots. The opening came loose, and a few dirty socks fell into the dust. I stepped aside. Mark, clutching his stomach, picked himself up from the broken glass. He didn't even have shoes on, barefoot, shuffling step by step out the door. His back was completely hunched, like a deflated ball. Rick slammed the door shut in his face. The door panel shook so hard that dust from the hallway ceiling rained down. Mark stood outside. He looked down and saw me on the steps. His lips moved, as if he wanted to speak. He reached out one hand, trying to grab the iron stair railing. His foot missed the edge of the step, and he lunged forward. He quickly grabbed the railing tightly, steadied himself, and gasped for air. "This is what it costs, Mark." I watched him standing barefoot on the cold concrete.
À $22,000 les sons.
"Enjoy it." I turned around, stepped over the scattered dirty socks, and walked down the stairs calmly. I walked out of the apartment building. The sunlight outside was blinding. I took a deep breath of cold air. The asphalt road scraped the skin off Mark Saul's, leaving traces of blood. He didn't even care. He just wanted to rush into that 20-story glass building and find his office manager to get back the emergency cash reserves he kept in his desk drawer. That was his last line of defense. He stood still outside the revolving door. His worn, wrinkled pajamas flapped wildly in the cold wind, drawing stares from passers-by. He gritted his teeth, smoothed his hair back, and put on the expression he had practiced, the one he thought still made him look like an elite salesman. He strode into the lobby. The lobby security guard was drinking coffee. When he saw Mark come in, he froze, cup still in hand. Mark didn't stop. He headed straight for the elevators. The burly guard quickly set down his cup, strode over, and grabbed Mark by the shoulder. "Sir, please stop." The guard's voice was loud, echoing through the lobby. Mark turned sideways and shook off the guard's hand. "I'm the sales director here. Are you blind?" "Director?" The guard raised an eyebrow, pulled a piece of paper from his belt, and pressed it against Mark's chest. Mark looked down at the paper. It was the company's termination notice. A red official seal stamped over 2 lines of bold text, "For severe violation of professional ethics and internal financial misconduct, employment is terminated immediately and all personal belongings in the office area are confiscated." "You're fired, Mr. Mark." The HR manager leaned out from the second-floor hallway, looking down at him. "The activity funds you used are unaccounted for. Compliance is investigating. Now, please leave this building immediately. Don't make us take action." Mark stood frozen. His hand gripped the termination notice, the paper crinkling between his fingers.
$22.
Plus all that furniture. He had thrown everything away. Not only did he not get that secret stash of money, but he was also saddled with a mysterious financial lawsuit. He turned his head and looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows. Across the street, in a brightly lit cafe, I was sitting by the window, holding a cup of steaming black coffee. My phone was in my hand, the screen displaying the lobby's surveillance feed. I stood up, put on my coat, and walked out of the cafe. I crossed the street and approached the revolving doors of the company building. I didn't go in. I just stood there, looking through the glass at Mark's dejected expression. He looked up and saw me through the glass. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshot of Mark's private billing records, and pressed send right in front of him. The recipient was the notoriously harsh vice president of the company. Mark's eyes widened. Through the glass, he mouthed, "Don't send it." He pounded frantically on the glass. But his pajamas looked ridiculous, and under the security guard's shoving, he stumbled back 2 steps. He fell onto the concrete floor. I walked through the revolving door. The security guard nodded at me and even pulled the door open wider. I walked up to Mark. I looked down at him. His hair was plastered to his forehead, making him look utterly defeated. "Mark," I said, pulling a business card from my pocket. "This is the debt recovery notice the company just sent me. It lists exactly how much you embezzled from the company accounts. If you can't pay it back, the tax authorities will be at your door tomorrow." I placed the card on top of his head and pressed it down, letting it cover his forehead. "If you admit defeat now and voluntarily sign the debt acknowledgement form at the finance department, I'll consider covering the interest on this debt." Mark stared at the card, his breathing growing rapid. He looked up. Those once shrewd eyes now held only the despair of someone repeatedly crushed by life. "Why do you hate me so much?" he asked in a hoarse voice.
No.
"I don't hate you at all." I shrugged and turned toward the elevator. "I'm just helping you recover your life investment. That surrogacy venture you invested in. The returns clearly aren't very high, are they?" I pressed the elevator button. As the elevator doors closed, I heard Mark let out one last animal-like howl outside. But he no longer posed any threat. He was a complete wreck. I returned to the empty, spacious house. I had thoroughly cleaned it. The carpet had been professionally washed, leaving no trace of his tobacco or cologne. I sat down on the living room sofa. The silence around me was absolute. I opened my phone's calendar. The blue reminder for prenatal checkup had been completely deleted. All the alarms, all the appointments, all the shared files. I had dismantled every gear he had left in my life. He now had nothing. Not only was he out of money and without a house, but even his elite director title, the only thing that gave him any presence, was now worthless. I picked up the phone and called the agent. For next month's rent, please deposit it directly into my trust account. I hung up. Sunlight streamed through the window onto the table. There were no red strings on my hands, no ties. This was truly my life now. For the final settlement, I chose that rental apartment. I drove to the red brick building. Outside the car window, trucks rumbled over the overpass, shaking my windshield. I carried a transparent plastic storage bin. Inside was the signed and stamped divorce agreement, along with a stack of expired shopping receipts Mark had left in the storage room. Receipts for every expensive supplement he had bought for his surrogacy plan. The light bulb on the third-floor hallway was broken, making it too dim to see the floor clearly. I walked to the door of room 302. The door was half open, with a faint blue glow from a TV inside. I didn't knock. I pushed the door open directly. The room was a mess, like a garbage dump. Mark was sitting cross-legged on the sagging fabric sofa, its springs worn out. He was wearing a filthy, darkened pajama set, his hair long enough to cover his eyes, and stubble messily hanging from his chin. Empty instant noodle cups were piled around his feet, mixed with a stale smell of sweat. The TV was playing a low-quality fitness show, with the host shouting at the camera, "Stay healthy." Mark heard the sound and turned his head sharply. When he saw me, a strange glimmer flickered in his dull eyes. He immediately stood up, grabbed a jacket nearby, and threw it over his shoulders to hide his shabby pajamas. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice hoarse and breathless. I placed the transparent storage bin on the cracked glass coffee table. The glass surface let out a harsh scraping sound. "To make the final settlement," I said. I took out the stack of shopping receipts and placed them on his lap. He was thin and dirty, the jacket hanging loosely on his frame. These $20,000 for registration fees, $2,000 for anti-stretch mark essential oil, and box after box of Bird's Nest. I pointed at the numbers on the list, my tone steady. "See, every single one has your signature. When you signed your name back then, did you ever think you were spending money on this narrow, filthy cage?" Mark stared down at the numbers on the paper. His fingers trembled violently, the paper rustling in the cramped room. "Where's Amy?" I looked around. The room had nothing but this sofa and half a smashed coffee table, no other furniture. "She's gone." Mark looked up at the ceiling. "She ran off back to her hometown with that pool hall thug. She took all my jackets, even sold my limited edition sneakers to buy bus tickets." He gave a bitter smile. It looked worse than crying. "You know how I feel right now." He stared at a pile of instant noodle cups in the corner. "Every morning I wake up, I think this is all a dream. I figure if I just close my eyes and open them again, I'll be back in that house with the garden, and I'll see you there making breakfast waiting for me." I pulled the divorce agreement out of the storage bin. I spread it open, pressing it down on top of those expired shopping lists. "The dream is over, Mark." I fished a pen out of my bag and set it beside the agreement. "This house and all the assets under my name have already been liquidated. This afternoon, the agent sold my house. The new owner moves in next week." Mark snapped his head toward me. You sold the house? It never belonged to you." I pointed at his trembling hand. "Sign it. Once you sign, there's no more debt or credit between us. That gap in the company funds you embezzled. The company has already handed the evidence to the auditors. You know what that means next." Mark looked at the pen. Outside, another truck rumbled over the overpass. The window glass shook violently. The old TV in the living room just switched to a wedding celebration commercial, a red double happiness character reflecting on Mark's pale, wrinkled face. He picked up the pen. The agreement wasn't thick. He signed slowly, every stroke trembling violently. He seemed to want to make the signature as neat as before, but the pen tip pressed into the paper, leaving a long ink smear. He finished the last letter and put the pen down. I took back the agreement, checked the signature, confirmed it was fine. "From this moment on," I said, putting the agreement back into the storage bin, "you're free. And of course, you have nothing." I closed the bin. "Mark, back then for that surrogacy plan, you gave up your stable job, your reputation, even this house." I gave him one last look. You invested for so long.
This is your return.
I walked to the door, reached out, and grabbed the handle. Oh, and I turned back. Your surrogate mother told me one thing before she left. On that fake pregnancy diagnosis, she listed you as the sole debtor. That embezzled money the company is going after. It's your personal debt.
Nothing to do with me.
Mark's pupils shrank sharply. He stared at me as if he wanted to lunge, but his legs gave out, and he dropped straight to his knees among those instant noodle cups. His body shook violently, a trapped animal whimper escaping his throat. I pulled the door open and stepped out of that stinking, cramped room. The motion sensor light in the hallway flickered on at my footsteps, casting a weak yellow glow. I walked all the way to the elevator and pressed the button. The elevator doors slid open in front of me. I stepped inside. As the doors slowly closed, I saw that broken door at the end of the hallway. Mark knelt there like an empty shell. He didn't even look up. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for floor B1. The car was parked downstairs. I got into the driver's seat and started the engine. In that moment, the entire apartment building shrank smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror until it vanished completely into the night. I took a deep breath. The air had no smell.
No tangle soats.
I pressed the gas and merged into the highway traffic. Ahead were bright lights, a completely new road where no one could define me anymore. This is life.
Goodbye, Mark.